Today I'd like to address a trend that has been happening in the comment section of my videos. You see, as a history-focused channel, generally speaking talking about ancient civilizations, there are two forms of critique or resistance that I tend to get under my videos, among others. And the reason why I decided to make a dedicated video is because, differently from the constructive criticism that I often receive, against which I have absolutely no problems, I think that these two forms of criticism that I've been getting are highly inappropriate. And here is why. Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and the first form of critique that I used to get, don't really get it very often anymore, was the following. Metatron, all you do is talk about European history, you're clearly Eurocentric and so is this channel. This is bad, very bad, evil, you should stop. I can dismiss this one in 3 seconds. I'm a European, and I'm proud of being one. There is nothing wrong with being proud of the history of your area of the world, in this case Europe, of the achievement of my ancestors. And even if I wanted to only make a channel dedicated to, say, ancient Rome or European history, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with it, and it would not make it Eurocentric per se. In fact, I think that these people that accuse me of being Eurocentric don't even know what Eurocentrism means. I'll address that later on in this video. But let's move to the second type, which is going to be the focus of this video. Metatron, stop talking about our history, usually this means African or Black history, talk about your history instead. Case in point, one of, I want to say 500. Here are some more of the names some Europeans used to put themselves in our story, which is before his story. The rest of the comment is irrelevant to the topic at hand. Now, I personally believe that this is a very dangerous approach. It's incorrect, it promotes division and hatred, and it's ultimately flawed from a logical standpoint, as I will demonstrate. I think the main point that I'd like you to take home today is the fact that there is no such thing as your history, our history, his history. It's all human history. The simple fact that I'm Italian doesn't make me the ultimate authority on ancient Rome. In fact, some of the best archaeologists I've ever met were from the United States when it comes to specific digs concerning to ancient Rome. Although, of course, there are also some fantastic archaeologists in Italy. Should the Americans not be allowed to study or talk ancient Rome because they are not from here? Ludicrous. The history of the Roman Empire belongs to me as much as it belongs to you, as much as it belongs to an American, as much as it belongs to an African, as much as it belongs to a Japanese. It belongs to the human species. With that being said, I don't think that there is anything wrong with feeling a certain level of personal attachment born from a sense of belonging when it comes to the history of your specific area of the world. That one is fine. I mean, I'm a Rome fanboy, probably because I'm Italian. But once again, that doesn't make that specific section of history exclusive to the people who happen to be born there, regardless of their level of academic background or knowledge on the topic. You'd think that that would be quite obvious, but it isn't. Now, in academia, someone presents a thesis and then you proceed to try and attack the thesis. If new empirical evidence disproves the thesis, then great, we made progress. If instead the said empirical evidence demonstrates or proves the thesis to be correct, fantastic, we still made progress. Either way. Now let me show you how these people, when I say these people I mean the people who write these sort of comments, which by the way I get in the hundreds. Our history versus your history, or even more cringeworthy, his story. His story. That only works in English. Yeah, I won't even get into the etymology of the word and the fact that it has nothing to do with the pronoun, whatever. And what I'm noticing in the comments is the very same people that say our history versus his history, your history, are also the same people that say this. Throughout this video, when I say these people, I mean the people that write these comments. I'm not saying black people in general. This is not, once again, as I have to specify, this is not a white versus black. I got a lot of black people in the comments that support my work, agree with my points, and even if they disagree, they're very polite and very academic. I'm talking about specifically the kind that writes this. Here is their modus operandi. You present a thesis that doesn't push their political message, they call you racist. Now, there is nothing complex or inherently ingenious about this method which would require any sort of analytic examination. You don't have to have any specific level of IQ or qualification. Perhaps if you have a degree in gaslighting, I suppose that would help. But here's the mechanism. One of the primary justifications underpinning such thinking relates to the hopefully not widely held view that the belonging to a specific ethnic group is a central requirement for joining academic discourse, pertaining to a specific cultural subgroup or geographical area. Moreover, after reading hundreds of messages that seem to be pushing the same ideology, what I'm noticing is that it seems to be focused specifically on your skin tone, not your cultural heritage or where you were born or brought up. In other words, even if I happen to be born and raised in Central Africa, still, this wouldn't be my history, because I would be a European invader. Therefore, I shouldn't be allowed to talk about African history. The presence or otherwise lack of established traditions related to a specific people seem to be irrelevant. You don't look a certain way, you shouldn't talk. This is the first critical point of failure of such ideology. I'll show them all of them. Let's move to the second one. The second flaw of this mental ideology or position is the fact that these criteria or parameters are not applied equally throughout the full spectrum of human phenotypical variation. It only applies to white people. Because if this was applied equally, it would mean that if a black scholar were to talk about the ancient Roman Empire and they did a fantastic job, they dotted all their I's, crossed all their T's, presented incredible empirical evidence, I would have to disqualify whatever the scholar is saying because he's not European, therefore he shouldn't be speaking. Of course, that's not what I do. And of course, it's not what they do either. That's the definition of hypocrisy. Now here is how I counter that. 1. When it comes to the establishment and assessment of the level of credibility of any given speaker within the realm of academic discourse, the first element I should look for is his overall level of education, academic background, and overall knowledge on the subject, not the color of one's skin. The color of one's skin is irrelevant. 2. The qualitative method of research applied by said speaker, not the color of their skin. 3. How compelling the empirical evidence that is presented by said speaker supports their claims, not their skin tone. 4. The capacity for reasonably complex critical thinking, regardless of the socio-political status, ethnic makeup, culture, personal beliefs, in accordance to prevailing academic standards. Finally, the speaker's approach when it comes to personal bias. What sort of guard does he employ to protect from selective bias? These are the main aspects that I check every time I try to assess the level of credibility of a speaker on any subject. And the skin tone is not one of these, and it never will be. Yet I get called a racist. On the other side of the spectrum, the sort of approach applied by the people who wrote these comments is clearly diametrically opposite. The way these people assess the level of credibility of a speaker is based on a phenotypic trait, namely skin tone variance. So if you're white, you have no credibility and you're a liar. Conversely, if you're black instead, yes, you should listen. Who is the racist? To study the history of ancient civilizations is to investigate ideas about our world history, questioning intelligently, thinking logically, reading critically. In order to overcome such destructive and discriminatory thinking, it is absolutely paramount to provide a method to study the artifacts of the human past. We should always encourage critical thinking, keeping in mind that every historical fact that we may be clinging on to is always open to reconsideration. To accept without question people with an agenda who are invoking political consideration based on a reactionary worldview is in fact counterproductive not only for the people you're attacking, but also for your own people. No good comes from this. Regardless of what sort of historical justification you think you may have, hatred is poison, and who is exercised upon is irrelevant. It will block progress, and it will hinder the development of evidence-based factual, independent thinking. The following is what I would consider to be the correct framework for approaching any historical discussion. Logical coherence, no internal contradictions, correspondence to external source testimony, no suppressed evidence, no unnecessary abstractions, and if possible, conceptual elegance. The correct usage of linguistic sources which, oh my gosh, you have no idea how many times I get people mentioning something written in a language they have no idea of, and then they fixate on points that in that language make absolutely no sense. For example, a language that is only written with consonants, and they fixate on the usage of a specific word even though we don't know if that was what that word means because of how it was vocalized. I will now proceed to attack 3 specific aspects of this argument. I will attack the idea that only people from a specific country can talk about the history of said country. I will attack the idea that only people that look a certain way can talk about the history of that country. I will attack the idea that you judge a person's message based on their skin tone and, I can't believe I have to say this, their hairstyle. Once again, based on an accurate and precise evaluation of these comments, I noticed that as a result of this specific mental paradigm, we have 3 critically flawed consequences: exclusion, gatekeeping, and of course, racism. Human history belongs to all of us. The correct study of the ancient past, and specifically the development of human civilization, does not belong to any specific political group or ethnic group. It is a treasure of knowledge that is the basis for advancements in the arts and sciences. To give an example, how can one establish a study course in order to be able to understand the, for example, symbiotic relation between civilization and war, with all the possible implications when it comes to understanding the past in order to craft a better future, if we need to be constantly impeded and burdened by discrimination? Whenever you're writing a book, when it comes to history, it's always important to try and establish, if you want to do it the right way, a certain level of neutrality. I can like the ancient Romans as much as I want. I need to be objective when I describe the sort of historical events, including the belligerent ones, and the political and socioeconomic reasons behind those events. If these people were to write these books, the way they would write them is, oh, evil, bad white man, the horrible Europeans, this is why they're doing, because they're horrible and they're evil. Where are you going with that? What will you achieve with that? Conclusion. Do you really want to live in a world where people are prohibited from speaking or studying a specific subject based on their skin tone? Is this what you would call progress? The solution is to treat people equally in the real sense of the word. Not judge people by their skin tone, where we are trying to understand whether the positions that they're bringing forth have any sort of validity. We must judge a speaker according to their professionalism, their credentials, and their motives. And if you're surrounded by people that think this way, in order to avoid the possibility of being influenced by such ideological thinking, which would limit significantly the possibility for further discovery for our entire species, stay away.